I'm reading Truth Lending Act, and I'm reading it out of the Code of Federal Regulations, where it makes more sense. I'm in 1026.37. The content of disclosures for certain mortgage transactions. In paren, we have here loan estimate. So for each transaction subject to 1026.19E, the creditor shall disclose the information in this section. That's general information. 1. Form and title. The title of the form loan estimate, using that term. 2. The form purpose. The statement, save this loan estimate to compare with your closing disclosure. 3. The creditor. The name and address of the creditor making the disclosure. 4. The date issued. The date the disclosures are mailed or delivered to the consumer by the creditor. Labeled date issued. 5. Applicants. The name and mailing address of the consumers applying for the credit, labeled applicants. 6. Property. The address including the zip code and property that secures or will secure the transaction, or if the address is unavailable, the location of such property including a zip code labeled property. By the way, I'm pretty sure this is only applicable to closed and federally related mortgage transactions, including home equity closed-end loans. Sales price, the property and the sales price must be disclosed. Property is the address, including the zip code of the property that secures or will secure the transaction, or if the address is unavailable, the location of such property, including a zip code labeled property. 7. Sale price. 1. For transactions that involve a seller, a contract sale price of the property identified in paragraph A6 of this section, labeled sale price. Numeral 2. For transactions that do not involve a seller, the estimated value of the property identified in paragraph A6, labeled property value. 8. The loan term, the term to maturity of the credit transaction, stated in years or months or both as applicable, labeled loan term. Purpose, the consumer's intended use of the credit labeled purpose using one of the following terms. 1. Purchase, if the credit is to finance the acquisition of the property identified in paragraph A6 of this section, the creditor shall disclose that the loan is for a purchase. 2. Refinance, if the credit is not for the purpose described in paragraph A91I of this section, and if the credit will be used to refinance an existing obligation as defined in 102620A, but without regard to whether the transaction is the original creditor or a holder or servicer of the original obligation that is secured by the property identified in paragraph A6 of this section, the creditor shall disclose that the loan is for a refinance. 3. Roman numeral 3, construction, if the credit is not for one of the purposes described in the earlier two Roman numerals of this section, and the credit will be used to finance the initial construction of a dwelling on the property identified in paragraph A6 of this section, the creditor shall disclose that the term is for construction. Home equity loan, if the loan is not for one of the purposes described in paragraphs A9I through 3, Roman numeral 3 of this section, the creditor shall disclose that the loan is a home equity loan. Product, a description of the loan product labeled product. Roman numeral 1, the description of the loan product shall include one of the following terms. That's A, adjustable rate. If the interest rate may increase after consummation, but the rates that will apply or the periods for which they will apply are not known at consummation, the creditor shall disclose the loan product as an adjustable rate. B, step rate. If the interest rate will change after consummation and the rates that will apply and the periods for which they will apply are known at consummation, the creditor shall disclose the loan product as a step rate. C, fixed rate. If a loan product is not an adjustable rate or step rate as described in paragraphs A10, I1, and B of this section respectively, creditor shall disclose the loan product as a fixed rate. Roman numeral 3, the description of the loan product shall include the features that may change the periodic payment using the following terms. Subject paragraph A10, Roman numeral 3 of this section as applicable. A is negative AM, B is interest only, C is step payment, D is balloon payment, E is seasonal payment. And those are rather self-explanatory. In fact, much of this has already been reviewed in Reg Z and also RESPA, so I will be brief. Roman numeral 3, the disclosure of the loan feature under paragraph A10, Roman numeral 2 of the section shall precede the disclosure of the loan product under paragraph A10, Roman numeral 1 of the section if a transaction has more than one of the loan features described in paragraph A10 to Roman numeral 2 of the section. The creditor shall disclose only the first applicable feature in the order the features are listed in paragraph A10, Roman numeral 2 of the section. Moving on to Roman numeral 4, the disclosures required in this section must be preceded by the duration of any introductory rate or payment period and the first adjustment period as applicable. Number 11, under, I guess, the contents of the loan estimate is loan type. Using the terms conventional FHA, VA, or other for federally insured or guaranteed loans other than those described in the earlier paragraphs, and for loans insured or guaranteed by a state agency, the creditor shall disclose the loan type as other and provide a brief description of the loan type. Must include the loan identification number, rate lock, which is a statement of whether the interest rate disclosed pursuant to paragraph B2 of the section is locked for a specific period of time labeled rate lock. Roman numeral 1 or 2, and then letter B, loan terms. Roman numeral 1, for transactions in which the interest rate is locked for a specific period of time, the creditor must provide the date and time, including the applicable time zone for what period the period ends. Roman numeral 2, the rate lock statement required under this paragraph, A13, shall be accompanied by a statement that the interest rate, any points, and any lender credits may change unless the interest rate has been locked, and the date and time, including the applicable time zone at which estimated closing costs expire. Loan terms, B under, A. Great. Instead of A, and what was A again? Instead of A, which is the general information, now we're talking about the loan terms in B, and all contents of the loan estimate. The loan terms requires a separate table that satisfies the following requirements. And we talked about this table with the 5 columns, discussing the loan amount, interest rate, principal and interest payment, prepayment penalty, which I believe has to be below the table, balloon payment, adjustments after consummation, adjustment in loan amount, adjustment in interest rate, and increase in periodic payment, details about prepayment penalty and balloon payment, now we start getting kind of specific about the timing of payments. And then we're itemizing fees. No, we're not. We're still talking about the table and subheadings within the table. Number 4, taxes, insurance, and assessments. Label. 5, the calculation of taxes and insurance. before we get into Subpart D, which is cost of closing. The cost of closing table. E is website reference. F is closing cost details, loan costs, within which you have origination charges, points, services you cannot shop for, those you can shop for, total loan costs, the sum of the subtotals disclosed under paragraphs F1 through 3 of this section. Other items must be in alphabetical order under the applicable subheading. Use of addenda, meaning that if you run out of space for all these extra additional charges, that they need to be on, I believe, another page. Closing cost details is part G, other costs. These include taxes and other government fees, prepaids, initial escrow payment at closing, other, and total other costs, and total closing costs. It writes up here how to calculate that, and then item descriptions and ordering specifically, and a use of addenda once again. Subpart H is calculating cash to close for all transactions. There's a total closing cost calc, a closing cost to be financed calc, down payment and other funds from borrower is calculated. The deposit, there's a line, and then there's a deposit line. Funds for the borrower line. Seller credits line. Adjustment and other credits line. Estimated cash to close line. And the optional alternative calculating cash to close table for transactions without a seller. Meaning that the creditor may alternately provide in a separate table under the master heading closing cost details, under the heading calculating cash to close, the total amount of cash or other funds that must be provided by the consumer at consummation with an itemization of that amount into the following component amounts, which is going to be quite similar. You have the loan amount, the total closing costs, the payoff and payments, the cash to or from the consumer, the closing cost finance. The adjustable payment table is now a new section, Roman numeral, or letter I. If the periodic principal and interest payment may change after consummation but not based on an adjustment to an interest rate, or if the transaction is a seasonal payment product as described in an earlier paragraph, a separate table under the master heading closing cost details required by paragraph F of this section and under the heading adjustable payment table that contains the following information and satisfies the following requirements. 1. Interest only payments, optional payments, step payments, seasonal payments, and principal payments shall be disclosed. Principal and interest payments, shall be disclosed with the following information: the number of the payment of the first periodic principal and interest payment that may change under the terms of the legal obligation disclosed in this paragraph I, counting from the first periodic payment due after consummation, and the amount of or range of the periodic principal and interest payment for such payment labeled first change dash amount, the frequency of subsequent changes in the periodic principal and interest payment labeled subsequent changes, and the maximum periodic principal and interest payment that may occur during the term of the transaction, and the first periodic principal and interest payment that can reach such maximum, counting from the first periodic payment due after consummation, labeled maximum payment. J is the next section, which is an adjustable interest rate table, which is going to be highly similar, except that you must disclose the index and margin instead of step rate. And increases in the interest rate when they're scheduled, and predetermined, labeled interest rate adjustments. And I suppose that's for a step rate mortgage. Initial interest rate disclosed, minimum and maximum interest rate disclosed. Frequency of adjustments must be disclosed in your adjustable interest rate table. In the subheading change frequency, the month and the interest rate after consummation may first change, calculated from the date interest for the first scheduled periodic payment begins to accrue, labeled first change, and the frequency of interest rate adjustments after the initial adjustment to the interest rate, labeled subsequent changes. Number 6 within the adjustable interest rate table is the limits on interest rate changes, and that is the name of the heading. Disclose the maximum possible change for the first adjustment of the interest rate after consummation, labeled first change, and the maximum possible change for subsequent adjustments of the interest rate after consummation, labeled subsequent changes. Letter K is contact information. Under master heading, additional information about this loan, and you want to include the NMLS ID number and the license ID for the creditor, labeled lender, and the mortgage broker, labeled mortgage broker, if any. In the event the creditor or the mortgage broker has been assigned an NMLS ID, the license number of the unique identifier issued by the applicable jurisdiction or regulating body with which the creditor or mortgage broker is licensed and or registered shall be disclosed with the abbreviation for the state of the applicable jurisdiction or regulatory body stated before the word license in the label, if any. Number 2, the name and NMLS ID of the individual loan officer, of the creditor and the mortgage broker, if any, who is the primary contact for the consumer. In the event the individual loan officer has not been assigned an NMLS ID, the license number or other unique identifier used by the applicable jurisdiction or regulating body with which the loan officer is licensed and or registered shall be disclosed with the abbreviation for the state of the applicable jurisdiction or regulatory body stated before the word license in a label, and label, if any. Yeah, that's never going to apply. And 3, the email address and telephone number of the loan officer, labeled email and phone respectively. And letter L is comparisons. Under the master heading, additional information about this loan required under paragraph K of this section in a separate table under the heading comparisons, along with the statement use these measures to compare this loan with other loans. 1, using the label in 5 years, the total principal, interest, mortgage, insurance, and loan costs scheduled to be paid through the end of the 60th month after the due date of the first periodic payment expressed as a dollar amount along with the statement total you will have paid in principal, interest, mortgage, insurance, and loan costs. And 2, the principal scheduled to be paid through the end of the 60th month after the due date of the periodic payment expressed as a dollar amount along with the statement principal you will have paid off. 2, annual percentage rate. Using the term and abbreviation APR is expressed as a percentage in the following statement. Your cost over the loan term expressed as a rate. This is not your interest rate. And 3, total interest percentage. The total amount of interest that the consumer will pay over the life of the loan expressed as a percentage rate of the amount of interest or credit extended. Using the term total interest percentage, the abbreviation TIP, and the statement, the total amount of interest that you will pay over the loan term as a percentage of your loan amount. There's a new comparison tool I've never heard of before. M, other considerations. Under the master heading, additional information about this loan required by paragraph K of this section, and under the heading other considerations. 1, appraisal for transaction subject to United States Code as implemented in this part, or Reg B, respectively, a statement labeled appraisal, that the creditor may order an appraisal to determine the value of the property identified in A6 of this section and may charge the consumer for that appraisal. Creditor will promptly provide the consumer a copy of any appraisal even if the transaction is not consummated. The consumer may choose to pay for an additional appraisal of the property for the consumer's own use. An assumption, a statement of whether the subject purchaser of the property may be permitted to assume the remaining loan obligation on its original terms, labeled assumption. Homeowners insurance, at the option of the creditor, the statement that homeowners insurance is required on the property and that the consumer may choose the insurance provider, labeled homeowners insurance. For late payment, a statement detailing any charge that may be imposed for a late payment, stated as a dollar amount or percentage charge of a late payment amount and the number of days that a payment must be late to trigger the late payment fee, labeled late payment. Refinance, the following statement, labeled refinance, which reads, refinancing this loan will depend on your future financial situation, the property value and market conditions. You may not be able to refinance this loan. 6. Servicing, a statement of whether the creditor intends to service the loan or transfer the loan to another servicer, labeled servicing. Liability, after foreclosure, if the purpose of the credit transaction is to refinance an extension of credit as described in paragraph A9, Roman numeral 2 of this section, a brief statement that certain state law protections against liability for any deficiency after foreclosure may be lost, the potential consequences of the loss of such protections, and a statement that the consumer should consult an attorney or for additional information, labeled liability after foreclosure. Construction loans, number 8. In transactions involving new construction where the consumer reasonably expects the statement will occur more than 60 days after the provision of the loan estimate, at the creditor's option, a clear and conspicuous statement that the creditor may issue a revised disclosure at any time prior to 60 days before consummation pursuant to 1026-19E3, Roman numeral 4F. Signature statement, letter N. 1. At the creditor's option under a master heading required by paragraph K of this section, and under the section confirmation receipt, a line for the signatures of the consumer in the transaction. If the creditor includes a line for the consumer's signature, the creditor must disclose the following above the signature line. By signing, you are only confirming that you received this form. You do not have to accept this loan because you assigned to receive this form. Number 2. If the creditor does not include a line for the consumer's signature, the creditor must disclose the following statement under the heading Other Considerations required by paragraph M of the section labeled Loan Acceptance. You do not have to accept this loan because you received this form or signed this application. I get it. Letter O, the form of the disclosure's general requirements. Oh my God. Number 1, the creditor shall make the disclosures required by this section clearly and conspicuously in writing in a form that the consumer may keep. The disclosures also may be grouped together and segregated from everything else. Roman numeral 2, except as provided in paragraph 05 of this section, the disclosures shall contain only the information required by paragraphs A through N of the section and shall be made in the same order and position relative to the master headings, subheadings, labels, and similar designations in a similar manner as shown in Form H24 set forth in Appendix H to this part. Number 2, headings and labels. If a master heading, subheading, label, or similar designation contains the word estimated or a capital letter designated in Form H-24 set forth in Appendix H to this part, that heading, label, or similar designation shall contain the word estimated and the applicable capital letter designation. 3. Form, except as provided in paragraph 05 of the section 1 for a transaction subject to 1026-19E, that is, a federally related or mortgage loan as defined in RESPA, the disclosures must be made using Form H-24 set forth in Appendix H to this part. For any other transaction subject to this section, the disclosures must be made with headings, content, and format substantially similar to that in the Appendix H-24. The disclosure required by the section may be provided to a consumer in electronic form subject to e-sign, rounding to the nearest dollar. The dollar amounts required to be disclosed by paragraphs B6 and 7, C1. Oh my God. All this stuff should be rounded to the nearest whole dollar, except that the per diem amount required to be disclosed in G2 Roman numeral 3 of this section and the monthly amounts required to be disclosed elsewhere shall not be rounded. And elsewhere is G3. Whatever G stands for. Rounding to the nearest dollar. Letter B, the dollar amount required to be disclosed by paragraph B1 of this section shall not be rounded, and if the amount is a whole number, then the amount disclosed shall be truncated at the decimal point. C, the dollar amounts required to be disclosed by paragraph C2 Roman numeral 4 of this section shall be rounded to the nearest whole dollar if any of the component amounts are required by O4 Roman numeral 1A of this section to be rounded to the whole whatever. I don't even know what is C2 for? Oh my God, I'm not scrolling backwards to figure it out. What is G? Percentages. Can be disclosed up to 2 or 3 decimal places. Exceptions, unit period. Wherever the form of this section includes monthly to describe the frequency of any payments or uses month to describe the applicable unit period, the creditor shall substitute the appropriate term to reflect the fact that the transaction's terms provide for other than monthly periodic payments such as biweekly or quarterly payments. 2. Translation under the exception section. The form may be translated into languages other than English. The creditors may modify H24 in the appendix to this part to the extent the translation prevents the headings from fitting into the space provided. Logo or slogan can be inserted into the form, and a business card can be attached. And lastly, administrative information. The creditor may insert at the bottom of each page under the disclosures required by the section in the appendix any administrative information, text, or codes that assist in identification of the form or the information disclosed on the form, provided that the space provided on Form H24 of Appendix